Greetings Guardians, my name is Bife here. So I want to let you know that the complete lore of the Nine video is still in production. I'm still writing it. It's getting pretty big, but today I'm just going to touch on some basic stuff about the Nine that we learned thanks to the reveal stream. It is incredibly relevant to understanding them as beings, and to put it really simply, Alison Lurs and Robbie Stevens outlined a bunch of notes that let us understand the Nine more definitively than we ever have before. So today, I'll be talking about what we learned. To start off with though, what theories did we have about the Nine, and what did we definitively know about them before this point? Well, I think the one single true point that we absolutely did know was that the Nine were related to dark matter. This is spelled out for us in the lore books from the Season of the Drifter, in particular the Dust lore book and the story of Lavinia, the Cryptarch who goes rogue. But we were also able to theorize a ton of stuff from the lore. In particular, of relevance, there was the note that the Nine were somehow related to the planets of the system, and that they were both enormous and microscopic as a result. We could also safely theorize that they existed within a different dimension because they were accessible to Lavinia via the Cocytus apertures, which, for those of you who don't know, are the gateways out in the reef that the Nine took over. They used to link to the throne world of Crota, the son of Oryx, which was within the Ascendant Plane. When the Nine took over the Cocytus apertures, they were rerouted seemingly, and then were linked in with the realms of the Nine. We also had a sense that the Nine were individuals, given that there were voices within all of the lore tabs related to the Nine, and those voices seemed to all be different. This lent credence to the idea that the Nine weren't some kind of great group that acted within a hive mind, but instead they had individual notions of what was and what wasn't. They had opinions, they had preferences. They weren't eusocial, they were individual beings. Over the years, Bungie's also been content to sprinkle a bunch of red herrings, or at least dead ends throughout the lore, that make us think about what the Nine might be, and possibly draw us off their trail. I think the best example is in the Mara Senna, the story of the Awoken and their foundation. At the beginning of the creation of the Distributary, which is basically the Awoken's home world and the first place where they emerged inside a singularity, well, there's a point at which they wake everybody up, and it turns out that there are 9 missing Awoken survivors that were not found in the Distributary. Yeah, that may or may not just be a red herring. It may be some kind of loose hanging thread that Bungie pulls in later and relates to them, but I'm pretty sure that it is not related to the Nine, because of the simple fact that the Nine, as we are about to learn, have been here for much, much longer than the Awoken. For the longest time, I had proposed other theories as well, and I think the community was chock full of them. At one point in time, I believed that the Nine were Void Lords, and that they were feeding out in the space between light and dark, and that the emissary would one day open the door, and the Masters would step through, and when they stepped through, we would know. But it appears that that's pretty far from confirmed now as well. However, again, the stream came along for Edge of Fate, and now, thanks to Alison Lurs and Robbie Stevens, we have a bunch of definitive notes about who the Nine are this time around, and we have a bunch of quotes to work with. So, first of all, things we now know. The Nine are indeed not a hive mind, they are individuals. This is interesting because not only does it mean that we can see more definitively the 5-4 split within them, but we also can understand how each of them came to those conclusions and what their perspective on the world might be. As individuals, they'll have had individual experiences, and they have individual agendas, and they have reasons for having that 5-4 split and for siding on either one side of it or the other. This is also well expressed in their lore because there are some instances where our interactions with the Nine are really positive, and other instances where it seems as though they're very much not. If it was one being, this would be kind of a strange relationship, but considering that there are 9 of the Nine, yeah, now it's starting to make a bit more sense. I mean, to give you an example, some bits of the lore have been as whimsical as the game show of the Celestial Horse of the Nine, Dares of Eternity, but then you can contrast that with the fact that the Nine betrayed us at the opening of Destiny 2 and allowed the Red Legion to surprise attack the last city. Also, they might understand what the Red Legion was trying to do by capturing the light of the Traveler, because if they managed to do that themselves, all of a sudden they would then potentially be able to wield the light as well, and if they did that, then they would ultimately be able to escape their own place within the universe and make fate for themselves. For every funny moment where Xur's tentacled face is reminding us to have our ghosts spayed and neutered, there's a horrifying moment where the Nine basically enact something that leads to the death of a major character, like the other Sieur Aido, whose face is significantly less tentacled, so much so that, she was the lover of Queen Mara Sov, of the Awoken. Allison also stated that the Nine are all linked to the major celestial bodies of Sol itself. This puts the theory about the Nine being linked to the planets front and center and confirms it to be true. In particular, we got the specifics, which is that the Nine are not related to the 9 closest planets, but instead are related to the Sun and the 8 closest planets to it. Pluto isn't involved. Knowing this also brings up the definitive and terrifying point that for the longest time, 2 amongst the Nine's number were abducted, and one of them still hasn't been returned. This is kind of assuming that there is a direct and substantial link in form between the Nine and the planets, and that's not necessarily confirmed to be the case, but regardless, Mars has been affected, and Mercury, it still hasn't been returned. This also brings up some fascinating points about whether some planetary bodies, in Destiny generally, might be alive in some kind of other sense. If you want to see more of that, I plan on making a video about that soon, but to put it really simply, the Antaeus wards might have been talking about the Nine and other beings that are planetary in size all along. Allison describes this as a celestial pantheon that we'll be interacting with over the course of the Fate saga. They've also existed in the solar system and have been a source of space magic in Sol for a long time. In fact, for far longer than the Traveler or the Black Fleet ever have. Allison also attempted to describe the Nine with a moment in the lore which is from, I think, all the way back in Destiny 1, where alien life is kind of described generally, and she kind of attributes the Nine to it. I don't know this to be the case, but I believe that she's referring to some super old lore in Destiny 1, in particular, Ghost Fragment Exo, from all the way back in D1 Vanilla. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here. This lore tab is more about the nature of exos generally, but it comments on the idea of how alien something can be. There's anthropocentrism within the way that exos are viewed and within the way that all things are viewed within humanity's perspective, and it makes certain things seem alien to them. The note from the exo who's actually talking in the Grimoire card here is simply that if you want to understand something that is really alien, you need to look at the Vex and look at their minds. There is nothing about them that is human at all. The lore uses this phrase and these sentences to sum up the idea. You know what I smell on you? I smell the stink of anthropocentrism. I think you think that there's only one way to think. That's why the exomind is so human, you presume, because all higher thought converges. My friend, you should meet the Vex. There is nothing human in them. When Allison says there are aliens, and then there are aliens, and then there are aliens, and those are what the Nine are, I think that's what she's referring to. There are certain beings that are so different from us that we can't possibly understand how they think and how they perceive. This gives us a kind of view into who the Nine are, but Robbie Stevens also expanded on this point as well by stating that the Nine are also extra-dimensional beings that somehow are able to perceive our reality and interact with it differently, and who perceive us as we might perceive ants. We are almost nothing to them. We might still be useful ants for their plans, but they could just as easily crush us. We also learned a little more about the nature of the Nine's relation to dark matter, which is that whilst before it was impossible for us to perceive it, apparently we'll be able to see the Nine's powers and actions and even presence on Kepler more clearly because of the presence of a particular microbe. This allows us to perceive dark matter, which is why the entire environment looks so green, I think. Allison also confirms that the Nine are directly tied into dark matter and even made from it, so we get double confirmation of the one thing we definitively knew already. Apparently dark matter also tastes zesty, like bleach and math. Don't try that one at home, and definitely don't try to inject it. Dark matter and the power drawn from it is also something that we'll be able to see and use with the new sandbox tools in Edge of Fate, such as Matter Spark and Mattermorph. These abilities change the way you can interact with the world pretty dramatically, but they're also a fair expression of the strange extra-dimensional nature of the Nine. The Vex on Kepler were apparently also studying the Nine, because they can do something that the Vex can't, according to Allison, and Kepler is an excellent place to study them because apparently the dimensions on Kepler are very thin and can bleed into each other, and so there are things from our past on Earth that can be found out here in the Oort cloud on Kepler. And that is mostly it. This is a lot to absorb, but I think if we really break it all down, we have one of the most definitive sets of knowledge and definitive truths about the Nine that we've ever had here. That's kind of important for understanding what happens as we go forward. We don't know everything about their motives and who they are and what they think of us exactly, and who we might be facing as enemies amongst their number, but we know a few things definitively now. Firstly, they are linked to the planets. Secondly, they're made of dark matter. Thirdly, they're individuals. Fourthly, they have their own agendas. Fifthly, and perhaps most pressingly of all, they see us as tools, ants, motes of dust. And the last bit, which we can't confirm, but we can definitely speculate about, is this. A little grim note. Mercury is still missing, and so one of the Nine might be affected by their abduction. And one last little note on that fact. In the Division sidearm, we see 8 of the 9 voices of the Nine speaking in conversation. One of them is still missing. There's something to chew over for a little while. Anyway, we'll have more videos on the Nine and everything to do with Edge of Fate soon. I have a few massive videos on the way as it stands, but for the moment, I just wanted to go ahead and give this to you as quickly as I could today. There's a lot still going on, and there's a lot of content I want to get out this week, but for the moment, that is it. If you enjoyed this video, and if you want more Destiny lore content, go ahead and hit subscribe, and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. And if you have thoughts of your own, go ahead and leave them down below in the comments section, and if you enjoyed the video again, a like is greatly appreciated. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always has been quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Per audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.